In this video, we're diving into a massive story that's reshaping the Russia-Ukraine war and global geopolitics. In April 2025, the US and Ukraine signed a landmark deal, the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This is a big deal, and I'm here to break it down for you. Let's get started. So what's this fund all about? It's a 50-50 partnership between the US and Ukraine to rebuild Ukraine after the war with a huge focus on its critical minerals, lithium, titanium, uranium, rare earth elements. These are the raw materials that power everything from iPhones to fighter jets. The US gets special access to these resources, and in return, Ukraine gets American support, but not as handouts, as investments. It's a whole new way of doing things. Here's how it works. Future profits from Ukraine's mineral licenses get split with the US, and that money goes back into rebuilding Ukraine over the next 10 years. Ukraine keeps control of its state-owned companies, like Energoatom and Ukrnafta, which is huge for their sovereignty. And get this, from now on, all US aid, military included, counts as investment in this fund. Ukraine drew a hard line. No repaying past aid, no debt for their kids. President Zelensky said, "We're not signing anything that burdens future generations." That's a power move. Now let's zoom out. The Russia-Ukraine war is in its fourth year. The fighting stalled in many areas. Ukraine's infrastructure is wrecked, and the human toll is devastating. This deal ties the US to Ukraine's future in a big way. Forget Ukraine fatigue in the West. This shows America's not walking away. Why? Because now it's not just about morals or geopolitics. It's about money and strategy. The US has a real stake in Ukraine's economy. This deal changes the game in three big ways. First, US aid isn't charity anymore. It's an investment with returns. Second, Ukraine gets a stronger promise of long-term Western support. Third, it shifts the whole conflict. Ukraine's now a key supplier of minerals critical to America's economy and security. That's a massive geopolitical pivot. Let's talk about President Trump, who's back in office. He's been vocal about not wanting to keep pouring money into Ukraine. But this deal, it's right up his alley. It's transactional. He's saying Ukraine will pay back America, not with cash, but with access to resources. That's how he's selling it to Congress and his supporters. He's already approved $50 million in arms sales to Ukraine under this new setup, and future military aid will count as investment too. But here's where it gets intense. Trump's team is pushing hard for a ceasefire. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's warning both Russia and Ukraine, start peace talks or the US might step back as a mediator. Trump's reportedly fed up with Zelensky and Putin, saying Putin has to be dealt with differently. At the same time, Trump's leaning on Ukraine to be more flexible, especially on territorial concessions. No official demands are public, but word is the US is floating ideas like Ukraine pausing its NATO bid or even accepting the loss of Crimea and parts of Donetsk. That's a tough pill for Kyiv. Russia's not happy about this deal either. Hours after it was announced, they hit Ukraine with missile strikes on energy and transport hubs, probably retaliation. Moscow's calling it American colonization of Ukraine's resources. They're worried about a permanent US footprint in Ukraine's economy and might double down on seizing mineral-rich areas, like lithium deposits in Donetsk. There's already chatter about increased Russian activity there. Globally, this deal puts the US in direct competition with China, which dominates the rare earth market. Ukraine's untapped minerals could be a game changer for the West. American companies are ready to start surveying once the war cools down, but experts say building mines takes 15 to 20 years, and Ukraine's geological data is old. Still, this is a long-term power play by Washington. Europe's mostly on board, happy to see the US staying committed. But some EU leaders aren't thrilled about tying aid to economic gain. It doesn't look great. In Ukraine, critics are calling it neo-colonial. Lawmakers still need to ratify the deal, and opposition parties are ready to dig into it. Activists in Kyiv are worried about US influence over their economy threatening their independence. For now, this deal locks in US support for Ukraine, but it's not a blank check. It's tied to performance, resources, and results. Trump's reframed U.S. aid as a partnership, not a donation. That's a big shift. So what's next? Ukraine might feel bolder to keep fighting, but they'll also feel pressure to meet U.S. demands on reforms, transparency, maybe even concessions. Russia could ramp up attacks to mess with American plans. Trump's gunning for a peace deal before the next U.S. election, framing it as a win for America's strategy and wallet. This war's in a new phase. It's not just about tanks and trenches anymore. It's about minerals, energy contracts, and supply chains. Ukraine's fighting for its freedom, but it's also a key player in a global race for resources. The U.S. has made a huge bet. Its money, companies, and reputation are on the line. How this war ends might depend as much on deals in Washington as it does on battles in Bakhmut.